Like a fish out of water, many in Europe are running out of drinkable water, while others couldn't be bothered to drink from the tap.
To restore the wetlands is the lowest hanging fruit. It's a kind of cheap thing to restore a wetland. It makes result in a few years.
For wetlands restoration, oftentimes all you need to do is stop doing something, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You don't even have to actively...
Yeah, we just don't have to drive away the water.
The renaturalization actually gave them an opportunity to focus more on tourism, which brings more resources to them directly.
And more pelicans. You always need more pelicans.
Yeah, there are never enough pelicans.
The chemical industry do the same tricks as many years ago the tobacco industry.
Gergő, at least somebody is learning from history. You should be happy about that. Hello, welcome and welcome back to the Standard Time Talk Show. Are you a water-based life form? Then this episode is for you. I'm your host, Réka Kinga Pap, and on this talk show, I'm joined by guests from all over Europe and beyond. We release new episodes every second Thursday, so don't miss out. Hit the subscribe button, and you can also watch this show or listen to it in a podcast format on Display Europe and wherever you get your podcasts, of course. Whether you're a tropical mosquito or a tough succulent, let alone a human, we all need water. Access to safe drinkable water is essential for survival. Maybe you're familiar with the act of water hospitality. It has many iterations. In Vienna, for example, you are always entitled to ask for Leitungswasser, that is tap water, free of charge at any restaurant, cafe, or bar. Romania is introducing similar legislation, but the right to a drink of water goes way back. All the ancient texts, such as the Bible, for instance, mention the idea of offering someone a jug of water, of people meeting by a well, of travelers engaging with locals via water, says Liviu Celcea, anthropologist professor at the University of Bucharest. In Austrian cafe culture, this habit arrived as a direct adaptation from the Ottoman habit of offering water with one's coffee. Europe has a great average performance when it comes to water infrastructures, and much of the continent is geographically lucky to have access to this resource. But it's not universal, and things have been breaking down in recent years as climate change shows its effects, and the South, the East, and even Central Europe are gradually drying up. So where does our drinking water actually come from? I mean, I know the Austrians have their mountain water, so good for them. But we may first associate water with rivers and lakes, but actually, groundwater supplies 65% of the drinking water used in the EU. Water that seeps into lower levels of the ground is filtered by the layers of gravel and sediment it seeps through. This is also the logic of professional water filter systems. So it would be a big problem if someone with a lot of money would just take the groundwater out of a region, right? Don't you think, Coca-Cola Corporation? In the Mexican town of San Cristobal de las Casas, the local Coca-Cola bottling plant is reported to consume most of the community's drinking water, which has driven locals to buy bottled drinks instead, including those with a high sugar content. This trend is suspected to be behind a staggering figure. 35% of the population of San Cristobal de las Casas lives with diabetes. A bit closer to home, in Lüneburg, Germany, activists have raised the alarm about Coca-Cola's plans to pump more groundwater out of the heathland there. This is heavily criticized and protested by local initiatives like Fridays for Future or Unser Wasser, which means our water. If we look at Georgia, Moldova, and Azerbaijan, water scarcity has been a problem over the past 2 decades, and extreme droughts have been frequent in Ukraine, Romania, Hungary, as well as, much of South Europe. One of our guests today, Gergely Pápai, has been reporting on the effects of last year's droughts and even guerrilla activities in restoring wetlands for the health of a natural habitat. Yet, even when water is present, pollution poses a huge problem, agricultural as well as industrial. The main problem in the region's rivers is the high concentrations of ammonium and phosphate, caused by discharges of untreated or insufficiently treated wastewater and by agriculture, according to the EEA report. In most regions of the world, over 70% of fresh water is used for agriculture. Well, I guess we like to eat, right? But don't even get me started on how much water the IT sector takes. Microsoft reports a water consumption of 1.7 billion gallons in 2022, Google of 5.56 billion gallons in the same year, and this will just keep increasing with the prolific implementation of AI. Every time you ask ChatGPT a series of between 5 to 50 prompts or questions, it gulps up 500 milliliters of water. Yay! But how is the relationship with tap water in Europe today? Compared to other regions, it is a very privileged one. Western Europe has some of the cleanest tap water in the world, and yet more than 50 million people have switched to single-use plastic bottled water instead in the last 20 years. Why? There are local factors, of course, and there is one sweeping one, a strong marketing push from beverage companies to profile bottled water as a superior choice, even where its quality is no better than the publicly available tap water. In some cases, infrastructure problems play a role. In Barcelona, for example, the water comes from the Llobregat River, and a combination of chlorine, hardness, and a lot of minerals gives it a very poor taste. Now, if we turn to the east of Europe, the loss of trust in governments plays a vital role. After the fall of communism, many across the region adopted a more individualistic mindset, and the trust in government-managed public services such as water management was one of the victims. Today, we are happy to welcome 3 experts to tell us their knowledge when it comes to our relationship with water and how this will change due to climate change. Oana Filip writes about culture and life. She's a journalist for Scena No, a Romanian magazine and website. She is passionate about rural life, memes, and existential questions. Gergely Simon is an environmental chemist at Greenpeace in Hungary and the Pesticide Action Network Europe in Brussels, dedicated to campaigning and reducing pollution's impact on ecosystems and human health. Gergely Áron Pápai is a documentarian and the head of the video division at the Hungarian investigative portal Átlátszó. Issues of environment are his recurring topic, and his film of last year's drought went viral in the peak of the August heat. We are hosted today by the library of the Hungarian Center for Social Sciences. A big thank you to them for having us. So water flasks and sheepskin at the ready, my friends. Let's get to this.
Hello, welcome, and thanks for taking the time to join us today to talk about water. And I want to start with you, Oana, because you have very thoroughly reported on water and specifically drinking water in Scena No, also republished in Eurozine. How do you come to the issue of drinking water in a country where, as you report, 50% of people drink bottled water or don't drink tap water in Romania?
Well, I think the distrust in public utilities when it comes to water is an example of the wider distrust in state and everything state related, which happened after the fall of communism. We became a more individualized society, and this distrust comes from failures of the state a lot of times. So a lot of things, what happen is that people do trust the quality of the water, they don't trust the quality of the pipes. And you can see that in Bucharest, in the capital, we have a lot of problem with heating water, and a lot of time we don't have warm water in the apartments. We saw media reports about the quality of the water in the rural areas. With water plumbing, this also contributed to a wider distrust in the drinking water. We start seeing people drinking more tap water. In 2021, almost 60% of the population was drinking bottled water. And just 2 years later, in 2023, this figure dropped to 45%. I would say this happens for a wide range of reasons. First, economic. Living expenses increased in all over areas, so people try to save money wherever they can. It also comes from a more interest in living like a greener life. We actually have a law starting from last year, which now makes it mandatory for restaurants to offer you tap water if you request it. It's still not very known to the general public, even to restaurant owners. Around 30% of Romanians, 13% of Romanians think that tap water is like 100% sure, like give it to babies sure.
Tap water also comes from the ground, and there seems to be a huge drought and groundwater shortage issue in the region, across the region. We know that there have been historical droughts across Ukraine already before the pandemic.
During the COVID lockdown, I started to focus with my work on man-altered landscape. I just realized that, like, how we are altering our landscape here around Budapest and the Hungarian wetlands, which were like wetlands back then, and now it's a desertificating area. The landscape is changing because of the climate change, but on the other hand, there is a man-made reason for desertification, like channels or drains in the wetlands, what Hungarians are building or working on for more than 150 years now. Beside the climate change, we are just driving away the water to make the land farmable in an intensive or industrial way. Recent 20 or 30 years, water which is arriving, it is like constantly decreasing. And recently, as a journalist, I try to focus on solutions rather than just like making scary pictures of the desertification. I started to follow groups who are doing something actively against this draining system. I mean, they're lobbying, they do guerrilla actions to stop the water and keep it in the landscape and whatever. A group of activists just stuck one of these drains on the flatland of Hungary, and then the water stays at the location where it arrives.
They just like clog the canal and that's it?
Yeah.
With what?
Like with a few showers.
And you are reporting them so they can be prosecuted?
Yeah, they can. But like they also can be a good example.
Yeah, ultimately cereal crops are all very thirsty grass. And that just doesn't seem very viable. Gergely, you work with Greenpeace. You guys have been reported on and persecuted many times for the kinds of actions that your activists do. And you recently have made waves about a very concrete contamination case. Tell us about this contamination of well water and groundwater and what you have found.
I believe that industrial agriculture has a lot of awful and negative consequences to our environment. One of that is obviously the pollution of surface and groundwater with artificial fertilizers, nitrates, and of course pesticides, turning the wetlands into agricultural land. The massive irrigation which takes place all over the country also have a really negative consequence on our water balance. That's why we see more and more droughts, and that's why we are endangering the future of our, drinking water and surface water safety. Water shortage in the whole Danube region recently. So even the cooling of the PAK nuclear plant could be in danger in the summer. Massive battery factory investments are using extremely huge amount of water. So like one facility uses more water than like a 200 or 150,000 population town, and especially we are building them in the eastern part of the country, Debrecen, Nyíregyháza, and this area where already water, I wouldn't say there is water shortage, but there are droughts and there is already a risk of water shortages in the future. We have seen the second oil leakage or fuel leakage from the oil company MOL in last autumn in the country, and it turned out that it was almost 500 cubic meters, so like almost 500,000 liters of fuel was leaking into the soil. So it was just leaking for quite a long while after they realized that there is a problem in the system. The local residents' well was heavily polluted with fuel. Beside it's like 40 meters deep, and also already in the nearby wells you can detect it. There's a cleaning up process taking placed there, and they supposed to completely map out the pollution and take more actions to clean it up. But this accident really showed that the whole oil pipeline system is kind of vulnerable, and we see that the communication around these leakages are not that trust. We see now that the oil companies started to communicate a bit more openly, but still we would believe that such a big company should take like much more preventive actions and do much more to compensate the locals and to ensure that such accidents do not happen and that the oil disappears.
As a resident there, what I would want to happen if there is pollution is to know it as fast as possible so that I don't find it out because somebody's gotten sick or somebody's pipes explode or something like this.
We try to cover this whole story with the Átlátszó.hu. And then the oil company, in the first round, tried to repress the locals. For the first time, they said these wells are illegal ones, so it's hard to estimate how much damage they cause for the local resident with dam leakage, which is, I don't know what kind of behavior, what this kind of large oil companies used to do in the third world or wherever, not in the EU.
Or in the US. Well, let's
be
honest,
of course.
They don't really respect residents' rights in the US either.
The local residents and also our work could put some pressure on this oil company.
Display Europe is the force behind this talk show. It's a brand new content sharing platform that offers you articles, podcasts, and videos about European culture, politics, and community in 15 different languages. And yes, they don't even abuse your user data. I know it's a shocker. Yeah, it's true. Check them out at displayeurope.eu. And now, back to the show. I think it's very hard to compete with the Romanians when it comes to water pollution, especially with the gold mining accidents that have reverberated across decades. But let's compete nevertheless. So make your bets. Oana, tell us about also both droughts and water contamination that you have reported on.
We are now living in a trend of like every summer is the hottest summer, every summer has the worst drought that we encounter. And I think this is becoming a new normality for us in Romania and for people all around the globe, unfortunately. And we are still not ready to deal with it. Hearing you talk about like agriculture and industrial agriculture and the problems it brings to the environment, it made me think that we in Romania are still not ready on a national institutional level to see different kind of solution other than large-scale agriculture and large-scale irrigation systems.
In my family, we call it the myth of the big Soviet truck. Like
Yeah.
the way you imagine commerce, agriculture is in like giant containers and hundreds of them and big numbers coming and going, because this is the kind of industrial agriculture that now we call conventional, but it's conventional on like a 70-year scale. So it's not like a 400-year-old convention. What you've been saying really resonates with me, because this really also happens on a very individual mindset, that you have to rethink, what if not cash crops? What if not huge amounts of something? And then agriculture really has to be rethought. But then land concentration, which has been increasing across Europe, really plays against this.
I can tell you a little bit about one region that is now called the Sahara of Romania, which used to be irrigated via a large irrigation system built in around 60s, I think 70s. And the irrigation system transformed the already arid region into farmland, like a heaven of vegetables and fruits. And it became, in very few years, the region that we associate with watermelons, which is a very water-consuming crop. And after the fall of communism and after the water irrigation system stopped functioning and stopped being used. The people there resorted to different ways to get water, allow them to continue farming, and thus allow them to continue farm their watermelons. But in the long term, it's just like affecting more and deepening the water crisis that they are facing. So we might see this sort of change in the crops we produce as a response to the climate change and water scarcity in the region. We're still trying to find this new crop, so to say. And on the one hand, there is this sort of like instinctive feeling of saying, oh, this is not Romanian. Farmers are conservative and they tend to say like, oh, I don't know how to grow this crop, or I don't know who to sell it to.
Bulgarians were imported across socialist countries, like small communities of Bulgarian families, to teach the locals to actually farm tomatoes and eggplants and these kinds of crops, which is a very interesting legacy of the Soviet planned economy, that you just dispersed the Bulgars.
This sort of like travel of knowledge and of different way to approach this crisis. And we will start to look at what Hungary does to learn how to do it here, or what Bulgaria does to learn how to do it here, because we face some similar challenges. So I think in the future, we might see again like Bulgarian farmers coming here to teach us how to deal with our problems.
You promised to tell a bit more about pesticides and fertilizers. So take it away, please. How does this relate with water access? Because again, also drinking water comes from the ground. So this pollution not only affects the natural environment, which some people might say, less mosquitoes, who cares? But this actually does affect the entire water cycle.
For the general public, but even for decision makers, people still believe that it's normal to pollute our waters. Lot of pesticides, extremely dangerous to aquatic environment, are still being used. And not surprisingly, we can detect pesticides in all our surface waters. In groundwater, there is a general limit value for pesticides, but in surface water, still there is a discussion in European decision makers to adopt an environmental quality standard. These pesticides are really not metabolized, but they accumulate in the environment. There is a new rule that from 2026, a lot of substances have to be measured in drinking waters, like PFAS traces, like perfluorinated substances, also bisphenol A, which is an endocrine disrupting substance used in plastics. But since we don't want a 50% pesticide use reduction, which was already a couple of years ago decided in the biodiversity and in the farm to fork strategy within the EU Green Deal, we don't see how this risk and use reduction will be fulfilled. So this means that the pesticide contamination of our waters are still happening and emerging.
To all of this data, especially for those who have a hard time understanding them, we will link to your studies and your publications in the show notes. But tell us about this anti-green propaganda that you briefly mentioned, because it seems that there's not only political reluctance, but actually now active pushback against.
You remember the protests from the farmers, and it was kind of quite well linked to different political interests also. So we know that some of the farmer protests were really fueled by by lobby groups. But we see that a lot of governments have changed their mind and they want delays and a lot of exemptions from the PFAS ban. And we saw that really the chemical industry do the same tricks as many years ago, the tobacco industry, that like creating a lot of like almost completely fake studies and then advocating around it and try to downplay the risks. And we see that a lot of new right-wing and conservative and extreme right groups are really advocating against strict rules for saving and preserving our waters, for instance.
Gergő, at least somebody is learning from history. You should be happy about that. Hey, if you like the show, follow us on Facebook so you get access to bonus materials, behind the scenes, and can follow along and never miss an episode. Join the community of Standard Time Talk Show on Facebook.
Now back to the program. Gergely, you also reported on the disappearance of groundwater this last summer. Like, desert is an appropriate expression for some of the lands that you visited.
In the case of biodiversity restoration, to restore the wetlands is the lowest hanging fruit. It's a kind of cheap thing to restore a wetland, and it makes result in a few years. Animals and plants can come back and cover the field. So,
for wetlands restoration, oftentimes all you need to do is stop doing something, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You don't even have to like actively.
Yeah. We just don't have to drive away the water. We just have to change some regulations. We just have to change the system how we subsidize agriculture.
For decades, the land-based subsidies that you would get for agriculture, you could only access if that given land wasn't quote unquote underwater, I think in May. And
yes.
For a certain part of Europe, especially the northeast, that makes sense because they're constantly battling water. But for the center and east of Europe, especially the south of Europe, makes no sense because all the water you have to keep it on the land as long as possible, both for nutrients to generate and for decomposition to happen, but also so that water dissipates down to the groundwater levels. So if you drive off the water from the land so that you get the cash subsidy, which keeps your otherwise unsustainable business going, then you are actively undermining yourself, not just for that given year, but for many, many years ahead. And this policy was changed actually 2 years ago. So there's good news actually on the level of regulation, but it's a very spectacular example of something that was well-intended, but should have considered a bunch of more factors in there. You also reported on these very intensely desertified lands in the middle of Hungary.
Yes.
Are these agricultural lands? Are these like natural sites? What's happening there?
Hungary, I think basically everything is agricultural land. Even in national parks, they do some agricultural activity.
This library as well. I'm sure there's mold somewhere. And you know what? Even if we don't restore woods there, on these Hungarian plains, it's much easier to shoot game for all our politicians because it's all flat and open. So you can just let them out of a cage and they can shoot them. No, sorry, it's just the peasant that I am that's just very angry about these things. But let's come back to Oana. And you also interviewed Liviu Chelcea, is that how I pronounce the name?
Chelcea.
About drinking water and water filters, which Gergely has already mentioned. But he has strong criticism about the most prevalent water filter systems.
What he said, and which I agree to, is that for start, you don't know what's in your tap water, in the sense that water has like different chemical composition, and it can still be safe to drink. And then you take a standard filter, you think, oh, water is the same everywhere, but actually your filter is put to a bigger pressure, so you would need to change it more often than it says on the packaging. And of course you don't know that. Also, filters need to be changed constantly, and I don't know how many. It depends on like your personal practice, I guess, but for me, I would forget to change it regularly, like for sure.
For me, it's like the dust bag in the vacuum. You know, you change it when it already smells like it's going to burn, because otherwise I don't even think about it.
Yeah, and this creates a very bacteria-friendly environment. What Liviu said is, from his knowledge, the best kind of filters are the ones that you put on the tab, which are, you need to change them less, but they are also more expensive. Another expert I talked with about the situation, they had a really good point that the more we look at water as an individualized thing, as something that we as citizens need to take care on our own, then the least pressure is on the state to offer us high quality water.
The best thing you can do, I think, still for the environment is somehow consume as much tap water as you can, and definitely avoid single-use plastics. So try to, if you want to drink mineral water, then try to get refillable ones, so reusable ones, or try to refill it somehow. For instance, that you live in a house where there is still lead pipe, then try to ensure that you use some appropriate filters. For instance, in Hungary, the authority, the NNK, is listing the filters which they test as good and proper ones. The microplastic is usually now a little less free to issue in water. You can eat it, you rather inhale it or eat in your from seafood, for instance. Try to be aware of the risks around your water, and then you definitely can avoid it. And if you have a well at home, then definitely try to test for toxic substances. You can find laboratories which test for nitrates, for pesticides, for toxic metals, for arsenic, because arsenic is still a problem in many wells. So try to make sure that the water you drink is free of toxic chemicals.
The only way as we can fight against desertification is that we have to give back nature some visible amount of land.
I would also encourage people to drink tap water, see how they feel with it. It tastes better if it's cold, so try put it in the freezer a bit and see if it helps with the taste, because for some people taste is a barrier. We also saw an instrumentalization of the population fear of water pollution by right-wing politicians that say, okay, water is not safe to drink, but offer no alternative. And I think we will see this play more and more. And I think we should be aware of that and take care of that in the future, and try to again put pressure on the authorities to do their job, give us the best water we can, and think a little bit more of water as not as an infinite resource, but as of something that is very necessary to us in all aspects of our life.
And you just reminded me of something that I forgot to ask about, but I wanted to bring this up. The political instrumentalization of water also includes natural bodies of water, because in the recent 2, 3, 4 years, especially the Danube Delta has become a huge political battleground in Romania. Maybe, anything you want to share about this?
The Danube Delta is a very interesting point of very different interest. On one hand, you have the farmers' interest. It's a very rich land for agriculture, and historically, we've seen the delta being used for agriculture, actually starting in the communist period, where large areas of the delta was converted into farmland. After the fall of communism, we saw a reverse of that. We saw the delta being transformed into a bioreserve. Now we see a little bit of a mix of different directions, because what we see in the Danube Delta is mostly large-scale agriculture that does not benefit so much the people that live there. So the renaturalization actually gave them an opportunity to focus more on tourism, which brings more resources to them directly.
And more pelicans. You always need more pelicans.
Yeah, there are never enough pelicans. I mean, I think they might disagree with me because they do eat a lot of fish, but
Yeah, but they're pink. Come on.
Something for something.
But we see this sort of flip-flop with a lot of the Danube Delta. The war now also plays a role because we see increased pollution associated with the war. We see plastic pollution because there are more ships coming in the area close to the Danube Delta that pollute and let their waste. Air pollution because of, again, the increased naval traffic. We see a lot of different types of pollution that are now associated with war. We still don't have a lot of data. The Delta is one of the most biodiverse areas in Europe. It has a big impact on the quality of water in the Danube and the quality of water in the Black Sea. So it's a very important region.
And the viewers can find a beautiful report in Scena No and also in yours in Romanian as well as in English. So we'll link to those in the show notes. Thanks, everybody, for taking the time and talking water. And I need to refill my cup. Thanks.
Now we want to know, do you drink bottled water or is tap water okay in your city? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're already rummaging down there, give us a like and subscribe to the channel. This talk show is presented by Eurozine and Display Europe. The program is co-funded by the Creative Europe program of the European Union and the European Culture Foundation. Importantly, the views and opinions expressed here are those of the speakers and the authors only. They do not necessarily reflect those of the European Union or the European Education and Culture Executive Agency. Neither the European Union nor the EACAA can be held responsible for them. Now, not that we would mind them taking advice from us.